20% of the world's oil passes through a body of water you could swim across in a few hours. It is 33 miles wide at its narrowest point, and right now, there are nations on both sides of it that genuinely hate each other. If that channel closes, even for a week, the price of fuel, food, medicine, and manufactured goods spikes in countries that have never once seen the Strait of Hormuz on a map. That is not a theory. That is just geography doing what geography has always done, deciding who has power. So let's talk about it. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow stretch of water sitting between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. It connects the Persian Gulf, where most of the Middle East's oil and natural gas is loaded onto tankers, the open ocean, which connects it to the rest of the world. Every single day, somewhere between 15 and 20 million barrels of crude oil pass through that channel. That's roughly 1 out of every 5 barrels consumed on the planet. Japan gets most of its energy from there. South Korea, China, India, same story. Even countries that think they're insulated because they buy American oil still feel the shock because oil is priced globally. When Hormuz tightens, the whole world pays more. So on the surface, the story is this: a tiny waterway that happens to be positioned at the most critical energy choke point on Earth, surrounded by volatile geopolitics. Specifically, the long-running standoff between the United States, Israel, and Iran. But here is where it gets interesting. Because if you follow the mainstream coverage, you'd think the danger here is mostly about Iran threatening to close the strait whenever it feels backed into a corner. And yes, Iranian military commanders have said exactly that. More than once. They've called the Strait of Hormuz a lever they can pull whenever the pressure gets too high. But the real story is not just about one country making threats. It's about why the whole global system was built in a way that made this single, tiny waterway so catastrophically important in the first place, and who actually benefits from keeping the world hooked on what flows through it. Let's go deeper. After World War II, the United States made a decision that shaped everything that came after it. Rather than simply buying oil on the open market, America made a deal with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 945 minus oil in exchange for military protection. That arrangement quietly extended to the entire Gulf region. The US built bases, sold weapons, trained armies, and parked its navy in the Persian Gulf. In return, Gulf states agreed to price their oil in US dollars, which is a bigger deal than it sounds, because it meant every country on Earth that needed oil also needed to hold American dollars. That gave the United States an almost miraculous economic advantage. You can print the currency the whole world needs just to keep their lights on. Now, the Strait of Hormuz sits right in the middle of all that. It is the physical exit point of that entire arrangement. And for decades, the American military's job, explicitly stated in something called the Carter Doctrine from 980, was to ensure that nothing blocked the free flow of oil through the Persian Gulf, meaning the US Navy has been the de facto security guard of that strait for over 40 years. Iran knows this, and Iran also knows that the strait is essentially its only real trump card. Every time Washington tightens economic sanctions, freezing Iranian bank accounts, blocking oil exports, cutting the country off from global financial systems, Tehran looks toward that narrow strip of water and does the math. Closing it wouldn't just hurt the West, it would hurt China, India, Japan, South Korea, and dozens of other countries that have nothing to do with the political fight. But that's also the point. The threat of closing Hormuz is Iran saying, if you isolate us, we will make isolation everyone's problem. And here is what most people miss. The world has known about this vulnerability for decades. Alternatives exist. Saudi Arabia has a pipeline that bypasses Hormuz entirely, running overland to the Red Sea. The UAE built one too. There are liquefied natural gas terminals, longer shipping routes, and emergency petroleum reserves that major economies hold precisely for moments like this. So why hasn't the world simply reduced its exposure to one narrow waterway? Because reducing that exposure would require building alternatives, which costs money. It would require cooperation between countries that distrust each other. And crucially, it would reduce the leverage of every party that currently benefits from the world's dependence on Gulf oil. The Gulf monarchies, the arms dealers who sell weapons to protect them, and yes, the financial system that processes all of it in US dollars. The vulnerability of Hormuz is, in a very real sense, a feature, not a bug, for those who sit at the top of the current global order. Now zoom out. Why does this matter to someone sitting in Lagos or São Paulo or Warsaw? Because an oil shot from Hormuz doesn't stay in the Middle East. Fuel prices go up, which means transport costs go up, which means food prices go up. Fertilizer, much of which is made from natural gas, becomes expensive or scarce. And that hits farmers in countries that can barely afford one bad season. Central banks raise interest rates to fight inflation. Loans become harder to get. Small businesses close. Ordinary families, who had nothing to do with any geopolitical chess game, find themselves squeezed. That has happened before. In 1973, in 1979, in 1990, history keeps showing us the same movie. And now factor in that the current tensions between the US and Iran are, as of right now, at some of their highest levels in years. Factor in that the Middle East is already in a period of active conflict. Factor in that China has been quietly building relationships with Gulf states, challenging the old American security umbrella. And factor in that the energy transition to renewables, while real and growing, is still decades away from making the world independent of Persian Gulf oil. All of that converges on 33 miles of water. So here is the thought I want to leave you with. The world's economies are extraordinarily complex. Supply chains, financial markets, digital currencies, artificial intelligence. But underneath all of that sophistication, the global system still has a single physical point of failure that a handful of ships and some determined leadership could shut down in an afternoon. We built the most advanced civilization in human history, and we left it resting on a doorway that our great-grandparents would have recognized. The question is not whether that's dangerous. The question is, who decided it was acceptable, and why have we let them keep deciding?